All right, now we're joined by two guests that have their own ideas about what's wrong with the employment picture. We have David Semmens. He is an economist for Standard Chartered Bank. He has been ranked one of Bloomberg's best when it comes to the job market. And also Jeanne Branthover, managing director, Boyden Global Executive Search. In 2008, Businessweek named Jeanne Branthover one of the world's most influential headhunters. Great to have you both with us. Let me start with you, David. Is there any silver lining in this jobs report?
Okay, there is one silver lining. Leisure and hospitality rose 34,000. It was a reasonable comeback after dropping last month. But unfortunately, that's really it, other than the fact that wage growth managed to maintain its momentum pretty much that we've seen year on year. Now, when you look month on month, it was still flat. But year on year, the momentum is still there, which is showing that people who are working are still seeing an increase in their wages, which is good for income growth, obviously, but it doesn't help the people who are still unemployed. And now, obviously, as we saw, we're seeing more of those.
Jeanne Branthover, I know that you cover the executive segment of the market, and if you've got a college degree and you have the qualifications, can you still get a job?
Yes.
You can
still get a job. We're not surprised by this because it's mid-year. They increased base salaries by a lot compared to a year ago. There's a lot of cost involved in payroll, so they're going to check out everything at the mid-year, and they're going to say we can't afford to keep going like we've been going. Cautious hiring, but hiring, and looking at the areas of the companies that are growing. So right now, people are still working hard, lean, and the companies are being cautious, but it's summer. And I believe, and most people in the search profession believe, as of September, it is going to change and pick up again.
When you talk to people who are planning hiring or HR departments, do they mention, as the president did today, do they mention any of the negotiations about deficit spending, about the debt ceiling? You're shaking your head no.
What they mention is their strategy for growth, which every company still believes they can do. And so what they're really doing at this time of year is scrutinizing carefully what their costs are, what they've done, where they've grown, where they've not grown, and they are cutting costs much faster than they did years ago, and really cutting off the blood, but looking at where can we grow, and we're busy. They are still strategically hiring all over the world.
So, David Semmens, is this really just a tale of two job markets? I mean, in certain areas and in certain regions, depending upon where you are, you can find a job in your profession. But if you're not suited, if you don't have the technology skills, if you don't have the education, you're just out of luck.
Yeah, exactly. As Jeanne said, if you have a college degree, the unemployment rate for that standard of person is 4.4, whereas if you haven't...
4.4 versus the national, which is 9.2
exactly.
now.
And then when you have people who haven't finished high school, it's 14.3. And so there's such a wide disparity. Mm-hmm. I mean, these levels are still twice what they have been historically, and even higher during the good times. So it is still hard, in inverted commas, for people who have college degrees, because 4.4 is a lot more than the 2% that they're used to. But obviously 4.4 is far more favourable than 14.3, so the problem is the jobs you're seeing being created are on the higher end, which brings in wage inflation for that side. But the people who are on the lower end, which is the vast majority of the economy, aren't seeing the wage growth and aren't seeing the hiring that you need to see to get stellar good job numbers of the sort of 250, 300 that everyone wants to see.
What kind of employment do we need to see in order to at least maintain any kind of decent economic growth in the United States?
I mean, decent economic growth, you want to be seeing sort of 250, 300.
250 to 300,000 jobs.
Exactly. And 150 really just to be keeping your head above water with unemployment. As we saw today, the unemployment level ticked up even when the participation rate fell. So
explain what the participation rate is.
You're counting people who are actually looking for work. The number of people in the economy rises about 1% just from population and immigration growth. But people, when they decide they're not looking for work, then they actually count themselves outside of the labour force, and that's what's captured in the participation rate. Now, when that falls, it means that people aren't looking for work, and so that can distort how the unemployment rate should be. I mean, the unemployment rate, if you had a constant participation rate, should really be around 12.3% at the moment.
And it's nowhere near that.
Well, it's at 9.2.
Right,
it should be at 12.3 as
much higher.
Going back from the participation rate we saw pre-crisis.
Jeanne Branthover, you're listening to David Semmens talk about the jobs number, talking about the number of people who have actually left the job market. During the break, though, you say no. this is something that is probably occurring in various industries across the United States. But from what you're seeing, the executives that have the experience in technology, in finance, and are revenue generating, they're getting bigger salaries now than they have at any time in their career.
It's still a war for talent. That's really what it is. You go up the food chain, you go to the senior executives. Every company wants to generate revenue, and they're trying to figure out how can we do this.
But are they doing it? I mean, are they actually generating the revenue?
Absolutely. Wealth management, asset management. There are areas that are growing and showing revenue and showing big revenue. So really what we're looking at is they're looking at a handful of people that have extreme talents, that have track records, and are seeking them out. So really what's happening is if you have skills that companies want, you are still in demand. And you're not only in demand, you're getting guarantees, huge guarantees, to leave your firm and move to another firm.
Guarantees. David Semmens, is this also a situation where technology has played almost a pernicious role, whereby in the past, if you were a seasoned executive, you came and you needed groups of people to help you get the job done? Now, of course, one person can do the job of many different people because they have the tools of technology available. Companies aren't even going to give you the kind of support staff that you're used to having. So has that changed the dynamic of the job market?
The technology improvements are obviously important, but I would say offshoring has been far more important. When you look at the first decade of this century, you saw very little job creation in the larger firms in the US simply because people were offshoring pretty much everything they could. And so it was left to the firms that need to be onshore, the small and medium-sized businesses, to really create the jobs. And that's the transition that, unfortunately, we're still in the process of making. We're still bringing jobs onshore that need to stay onshore because, unfortunately, America and Europe is a more expensive option than Asia. And so unless you are having the skilled jobs and the people who need to be on the ground, going and seeing clients, or, for instance, giving a haircut, you can't get a haircut by remote control or through the TV. You have to have it on the ground.
At least not yet.
At least not yet.
At least not. You're right. Yeah, indeed. Well, I want to pick up on something, Jeanne, that David is talking about in this idea of offshoring, but also regionalism in the United States. Are you seeing firms that are hiring, but they're saying, we don't want to locate you in major business centers. We want to locate you in lower cost areas where maybe the quality of life is either good or even better than where you're leaving, but we want to move it away from high cost urban centers?
Not only are they moving it away, they're saying stay home and work. So virtual is so common now. So common that in financial areas where I'm doing technology hiring, it's unusual for someone to go to an office. They are so used to working virtually. So many of our clients have chosen to leave major cities, and not necessarily headquarters, but a huge part of various departments that are just cheaper to live in other areas that they don't need them to be in the major cities. So we've seen that over the last 3 years in a big way, because all of our clients are looking very much at cost and where can they save in any way. And that's really, non-employee related as far as payroll only.
All right, David, I'm going to play Scrooge a little bit, even though it is midsummer. Is it possible that we are just thinking that the government can do too much, that we've got to stop waiting for the government to do something, because that really isn't where the job creation is going to come anyway? And we just need to look at what is going to be available and build businesses, and never mind what happens in Washington. Jeanne Branthover said that no business that she's spoken to looks at the deficit talks, the debt ceiling negotiations. That's not of interest to them.
Right, I would agree with you. I don't think that the deficit is a major problem for most businesses, but what you also have to really look for is where are the jobs going to come from and what areas, rather than just simply offering tax credits constantly to make it more attractive. Although that is one route that solves the short-term problem, it is an attractive short-term fix, but what you really need is a fix for the longer term, and that's the only way you can have that is by increasing productivity, which is more investment in education and also investment in capital, because obviously the more machinery you have, the marginal product of labour increases, and that was one of the main aims of the investment tax credit that the government introduced in December of last year, was to make it more attractive to put your money into machinery and then hire more people. And unfortunately, we haven't really seen the lift from that because there's been the uncertainty around energy costs, but we are expecting that to provide a lift in the second half of the year. I know I can be downbeat sometimes, but I am upbeat about the outlook for the labour market in the second part of the year.
You are upbeat for the second half of the year.
No, I am upbeat for the outlook for the labour market in the second half of the year, and we do think there's going to be much more business investment. We do feel the consumers are going to be feeling better, and we do feel that the lower energy prices are going to see a drive in demand, and it's demand that's going to really increase hiring. Hiring doesn't lead demand, demand leads hiring.
I'm glad you're leaving us a little bit on a positive note. I want to thank you both very much. David Semmens, Standard Chartered Bank, Jeanne Branthover, of course, from Boyden Global Executive Search. Thank you both very much.